A month slipped by, the seasons beginning their subtle turn from the lingering heat of late summer to the crisp promise of autumn. The dynamic in the small apartment had shifted into a new, comfortable rhythm, punctuated by a quiet, mutual dedication. Taehyung was always busy. He'd acquired a sleek, second-hand laptop that now sat open on the chipped dining table, its screen a mosaic of financial charts, business plans, and email chains. He spoke in low, intense tones on a new burner phone, using words like acquisition, startup capital, and market saturation. He was a man possessed, building an empire from the foundation of the money he had multiplied. His goal was singular, to wrap Jungkook in a life so secure, so luxurious, that the boy would never again have to count his won or wear shoes with peeling soles. Jungkook, in turn, was buried in his studies. Midterms were looming, and his textbooks were spread across his bed, covered in a frantic scrawl of notes. The financial windfall had lifted a weight off his shoulders, but it had replaced it with a new pressure, the pressure to make his own future, to not simply rely on Taehyung's mysterious, formidable genius. They moved around each other like satellites, their orbits intersecting for shared meals and brief, sleepy good nights. The intimacy of their first week had matured into a deeper, if currently distracted, bond. One Thursday, Jungkook's head was throbbing. He had been in the library for 6 hours straight, and the characters in his law textbook were beginning to swim before his eyes. He packed his bag with a sigh, deciding to call it a day. As he stepped out of the heavy library doors into the late afternoon sun, he pulled out his phone to text Taehyung. Before he could type a single character, a voice, low and familiar, cut through the campus chatter. Taehyung. Jungkook ah. Jungkook's head snapped up, and there he was. Kim Taehyung, leaning against the trunk of a ginkgo tree, its leaves just starting to blush with gold. He was dressed in the simple, dark clothes they'd bought together, but he wore them with an innate elegance that made him look utterly out of place among the backpack-laden students. His arms were crossed, and a soft, private smile played on his lips as he watched Jungkook's surprise. Jungkook. Tae. What are you doing here? Jungkook hurried over, his heavy backpack forgotten. Taehyung. You said your head hurt from studying. I concluded a remote meeting early. He said it so simply, as if rearranging his intricate business dealings to pick up his boyfriend from university was the most logical thing in the world. Jungkook. You didn't have to do that. I was just going to take the bus. Taehyung. I know, I wanted to. He pushed off from the tree and reached out, his fingers gently brushing a stray strand of hair from Jungkook's forehead. The touch was tender, possessive. Students streamed past them, and a few glanced over, whispering at the sight of the intense, handsome man who so clearly didn't belong to their world, doting on the tired law student. Taehyung. Let's go home. I'll make you tea, and you can tell me about torts. He said the last word with a hint of amused distaste, as if the concept of civil wrongs was beneath his consideration. Jungkook felt a wave of warmth so intense it threatened to eclipse his headache. This was what Taehyung's empire building was for. Not for penthouses or luxury cars, but for this, the ability to be there, to pick him up, to take care of him. Jungkook. Okay, he smiled, a real, effortless smile that reached his eyes. Jungkook. But only if you promise not to try and give me business advice on my torts essay. Taehyung. Chuckling, no promises. Now, come on, your bus is too slow. He slung a protective arm around Jungkook's shoulders, pulling him close as they began to walk away from the campus, two very different worlds seamlessly converging in the golden autumn light. The late afternoon sun cast long, golden shadows as they walked away from the university gates. The frantic energy of the campus faded into the steady hum of the city. Jungkook's headache was already beginning to recede, soothed by Taehyung's unexpected presence. After a few steps, Taehyung's arm slipped from Jungkook's shoulders. His hand moved to the strap of Jungkook's overloaded backpack. Taehyung. Give that to me. Jungkook. It's okay, I can carry it. Taehyung. I did not ask. With a gentle but firm tug, Taehyung slid the heavy bag from Jungkook's shoulder and slung it effortlessly over his own. The weight of law textbooks and binders looked insignificant against his broad frame. The simple, chivalrous act made Jungkook's heart flutter. They walked in comfortable silence for a block before a brightly lit convenience store beckoned. Taehyung. Wait here. He disappeared inside and emerged a moment later with 2 ice cream cones, simple, vanilla soft serve, the kind that cost barely anything but felt like a luxury. He handed one to Jungkook. Jungkook. You remembered. It was his favorite cheap treat, something he'd mentioned in passing weeks ago. Taehyung. I remember everything. They continued their walk, licking their ice creams as the city bustled around them. Jungkook's cone was already a messy, melting delight. A drop of vanilla dripped onto his chin. Taehyung, you're making a mess. Jungkook laughed, trying to lick it away. Jungkook, it's part of the experience. Taehyung watched him, his eyes soft and fond. He stopped walking, turning to face Jungkook right there on the sidewalk. People flowed around them, but in that moment, they were in their own private world. Taehyung, you missed a spot. Before Jungkook could react, Taehyung leaned in. But he didn't use his thumb. He closed the small distance between them and pressed his lips gently to Jungkook's. The kiss was cool and sweet, tasting distinctly of vanilla. It was brief, chaste, but held a universe of affection. Taehyung pulled back just enough to rest his forehead against Jungkook's, his voice a low, intimate murmur. Taehyung, there, all clean. Jungkook stood frozen, his ice cream forgotten in his hand, a blush spreading from his cheeks down to his neck. The taste of Taehyung and vanilla mingled on his lips. The world, with its noise and its problems, seemed to fall away. Jungkook, you can't just do that in the middle of the street. Taehyung, why not? I am simply taking care of you. He said it with such simple, unwavering logic, as if kissing the ice cream off your boyfriend's lips was the most natural form of care in the world. He then took Jungkook's free hand, lacing their fingers together. Taehyung, now, let's go home. Your ice cream is melting. Hand in hand, the heavy backpack slung over Taehyung's shoulder and melting ice cream cones in their other hands, they continued down the street. The setting sun painted them in hues of orange and pink, two souls navigating a shared life, one sweet, stolen kiss at a time. The click of the apartment door lock was a definitive sound, sealing them off from the world. The moment the bolt slid home, the careful composure they had maintained on the street shattered. The heavy backpack hit the floor with a thud. Taehyung's hands were on Jungkook's face before Jungkook could even turn around, spinning him gently but firmly. The half-eaten, forgotten ice cream cones were tossed towards the small kitchen counter, landing with a soft, sticky splat. This kiss was nothing like the sweet, chaste one on the street. This was desperate, hungry, a month of stolen glances and late nights poured into a single, consuming connection. Jungkook's hands fisted in the fabric of Taehyung's shirt, pulling him closer as Taehyung backed him against the now-locked door. It was all heat and longing, a silent conversation of lips and tongue that spoke of missed moments and a deep, abiding need. They were lost in it. The world had narrowed to the space between their bodies, the taste of each other, the sound of ragged breathing. Which is why neither of them heard the soft, deliberate clearing of a throat. It was only when Jungkook, his eyes still closed, felt Taehyung's entire body go rigid against his that he realized something was wrong. Taehyung broke the kiss abruptly, his head snapping up. His hands, which had been tangled in Jungkook's hair, fell to his sides. Confused and breathless, Jungkook blinked his eyes open. And his blood ran cold. There, sitting on the two worn-out chairs in the center of their small living area, were his parents. His mother's hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles white. His father's expression was one of profound, stunned silence. A small duffel bag sat at their feet. They had come from the village unannounced. The silence in the room was absolute and deafening. The only sound was the frantic, panicked beat of Jungkook's heart thudding in his own ears. He felt frozen, pinned against the door by the weight of their shocked stares. His mother's eyes, wide and disbelieving, moved from Jungkook's flushed, kiss-swollen lips to the tall, handsome stranger who stood protectively, yet guiltily, in front of her son. Jungkook's mother. Jungkook ah. Her voice was a whisper, fragile and broken. Jungkook could only stare back, his mind a screaming blank. The taste of Taehyung was still on his lips, the evidence of their intimate moment burning in the air between them and the two people he had never, ever imagined would witness it. The silence stretched, thin and sharp as a blade. Jungkook felt like he was going to be sick. His father's stern gaze was fixed on Taehyung, who, to his credit, had not flinched or stepped away. He remained a solid, protective presence in front of Jungkook, though his own posture was rigid with tension. Jungkook's father. His voice low and dangerously calm, son. Who is this? And what is the meaning of this display? Jungkook's mouth opened, but only a strangled sound came out. Panic seized him. The carefully constructed lie, the story they had built for the forger, evaporated from his mind. Then, Taehyung spoke. His voice was calm, respectful, but devoid of any fear. He gave a slight, formal bow. Taehyung. My name is Kim Taehyung. I apologize profoundly for this disrespectful introduction. You are Jungkook's parents. The fault is entirely mine. He straightened up, his gaze meeting Jungkook's father's directly. Taehyung, I am a friend. I have been staying with Jungkook for a short while. Jungkook's mother, staying? Why? And where is your family? This was the opening. Jungkook found his voice, the lie tumbling out in a rushed, shaky stream. Jungkook. He doesn't have any, Ioma. He was raised by his grandparents, out in the countryside. They passed away recently. A fire. It took everything, all his documents, he had nowhere to go. I offered him the spare space. He gestured vaguely around the one-room apartment, which clearly had no spare space. Taehyung picked up the narrative seamlessly, his tone laced with a genuine sorrow that wasn't entirely feigned. Taehyung, Jungkook has shown me a kindness I can never repay. He found me help to get new identification. He gave me a roof. I am working now, saving to get my own place and to pay him back every one. He said it all, with such raw sincerity that Jungkook's mother's expression softened from shock to a dawning pity. Jungkook's father, and the way we found you. Is that also part of this kindness? The question hung in the air. This was the precipice. Jungkook looked at Taehyung, his eyes pleading. Taehyung looked back at him, and in that glance, everything was communicated. Then, Taehyung turned back to Jungkook's parents. He didn't lie. He didn't make excuses. Taehyung. No, sir. That is not part of the kindness. That is, my feelings for your son. He reached back, his fingers gently finding and lacing through Jungkook's trembling ones. Taehyung. I am in love with him. What you witnessed was a moment of my own weakness, my inability to keep my affection contained after being apart from him all day. I deeply apologize for you having to see that. It was not how I ever wished to meet you. The raw, unvarnished honesty of the confession left no room for argument. He wasn't just a stray Jungkook had picked up. He was a man, declaring his intentions with a startling and respectful candor. Jungkook's mother looked between them, her son, who was looking at Taehyung with a mixture of terror and adoration, and this intense, handsome man who was holding his hand and declaring his love in her living room. The anger seemed to drain from Jungkook's father, replaced by a weary, bewildered shock. The story was tragic. The confession was brazenly honest. There was no script for this. Jungkook's mother, sighing heavily, Egu, this is all so sudden. Taehyung, I understand. It is sudden for us as well. But my feelings are not. And my respect for you, and my gratitude to Jungkook, is absolute. The lies had built the context, but it was Taehyung's breathtaking sincerity that left them speechless. The confrontation was over, replaced by a complicated, heavy silence, the first note of a new and difficult conversation about to begin. The initial shock had settled into a thick, uncomfortable tension. Jungkook's mother had silently prepared tea, the familiar ritual a stark contrast to the surreal situation. They were all seated now, Jungkook and Taehyung on the edge of the bed, Jungkook's parents in the two chairs, the small, low table between them feeling like a vast chasm. Jungkook's hands were clenched into fists on his knees, his knuckles white. He stared at the steam rising from his untouched tea, his entire body wound tight with anxiety. Every cell in his body was screaming, waiting for the other shoe to drop. His father took a slow sip of his tea, his eyes, sharp and assessing, fixed on Taehyung. Jungkook's father. You said you were working. What is it you do, Kim Taehyung SSI? Taehyung, who had been sitting with a posture of respectful alertness, met his gaze without flinching. Taehyung, I am an independent business consultant. I specialize in market analysis and strategic investment for small to medium enterprises. I work remotely. The answer was smooth, professional, and utterly believable. It explained the laptop, the phone calls, the odd hours. Jungkook's mother, a consultant. That sounds impressive. Did you study for that? At a university? This was the dangerous part. Jungkook held his breath. The orphaned, reclusive backstory didn't easily accommodate a formal education. Taehyung's expression softened with a hint of regret, perfectly calibrated. Taehyung, unfortunately, no. My circumstances did not allow for formal university attendance. My knowledge is self-acquired. I found I had an aptitude for numbers and patterns. Jungkook's father, self-acquired. And companies trust you with their investments. There was a skeptical edge to his voice. Taehyung offered a small, confident smile, the one he used when closing a deal. Taehyung, they trust results, sir. My methods have proven successful. I am currently in the process of establishing my own firm to lend more official credibility to the work. He said it with such unshakable conviction that it was hard to doubt him. He wasn't boasting, he was stating a fact. Jungkook's mother. And your plans? For the future. Her eyes flickered to Jungkook, then back to Taehyung. The unspoken question was clear. Where does our son fit into this future of yours? Taehyung understood perfectly. He turned his head slightly, his gaze falling on Jungkook, who was still staring rigidly at the floor. The look in Taehyung's eyes was so full of tender certainty that it made Jungkook's mother catch her breath. Taehyung, my plans are to build a stable and secure life. A life where Jungkook never has to worry. He can focus entirely on his studies, on becoming the brilliant lawyer he is meant to be, without the burden of financial strain. My goal is to provide him with every opportunity to pursue his own dreams. He turned back to Jungkook's parents, his voice dropping, becoming even more sincere. Taehyung, I know my background is unconventional. I know I am not what you envisioned for your son. But I can promise you, with every fiber of my being, that my intentions are to honor him, protect him, and support him. Always. The room fell silent again. Jungkook's father studied Taehyung, his initial suspicion warring with the undeniable power of the man's presence and his direct, earnest promises. His mother looked moved, her hand fluttering to her chest. Jungkook finally dared to lift his head. The tension in his shoulders began to ease, just a little. Taehyung hadn't just survived the interrogation. He had commanded it. He had taken their doubts and addressed them with a breathtaking blend of honesty and ambition, weaving Jungkook seamlessly into the center of his future. It was more than Jungkook had ever dared to hope for. The fear wasn't gone, but it was now overshadowed by a staggering, overwhelming wave of love. The moment the apartment door clicked shut behind them, the suffocating pressure in Jungkook's chest finally broke. He didn't head for the stairs. Instead, he grabbed Taehyung's hand and pulled him around the corner, through a heavy, rarely used door and out onto the building's empty, concrete rooftop terrace. The evening air was cool and sharp, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere inside. Strings of faded prayer flags, left by a previous tenant, fluttered weakly between rusted poles. The city sprawled below them, a sea of twinkling lights that seemed a world away. For a long moment, Jungkook just stood there, his back to Taehyung, shoulders trembling. Then, he spun around. Jungkook. What was that? His voice was a strained whisper, thick with unshed tears and overwhelming emotion. Jungkook. I am in love with him. You just said it. To my parents. Taehyung stood still, his hands in his pockets, his face illuminated by the distant neon signs. He looked utterly calm, but his eyes were blazing. Taehyung. It is the truth. Was I not supposed to say it? Jungkook. It's not that. It's just, you didn't even hesitate. You told them about the business, about our future, about everything. You sounded so sure. He took a step forward, his fists clenching at his sides. Jungkook. I was sitting there, terrified, thinking we were about to lose everything. And you were so perfect. You answered everything. A single tear finally escaped, tracing a path down his cheek. Taehyung's composure finally cracked. He closed the distance between them in 2 swift strides, his hands coming up to cradle Jungkook's face, his thumbs gently wiping the tear away. Taehyung. Why are you crying? Jungkook. Because I love you so much it hurts. The confession tumbled out, raw and unfiltered. He leaned into Taehyung's touch, his eyes searching the other man's face. Jungkook. I was so scared. But you weren't. You were just, you. A soft, understanding smile touched Taehyung's lips. He leaned forward, pressing a kiss to Jungkook's forehead, then to each of his damp eyelids, before finally resting his own forehead against Jungkook's. Taehyung. I told you. I remember everything. I remember the boy who cried for a villain. I remember the boy who gave me his entire world in a small envelope. I remember the taste of vanilla ice cream. How could I be anything less than sure? You are the only real thing I have ever had. He pulled back just enough to look into Jungkook's eyes. Taehyung. I built empires of lies in my old life. I will not build a life with you on them. They deserve the truth of my heart, even if the details of my past are a shadow. Jungkook let out a shaky, wet laugh, his hands coming up to grip Taehyung.